They say blood is thicker than water. But they never mention what happens when that blood turns cold. When your own flesh decides you're worth more dead than alive. When the child you carried for 9 months carries you to your grave before you're even finished breathing. My son Marcus thought he was burying me in Sunset Manor. What he didn't know was that he was digging his own hole, and I was about to push him into it. I should have seen it coming the day Marcus started asking about my end-of-life wishes. Such a clinical phrase for such a personal betrayal. He sat in my kitchen, the same kitchen where I'd nursed him through chicken pox, where I'd helped him with algebra homework until midnight, where I'd counted pennies to make sure he had lunch money, and talked about my mortality like he was discussing the weather. "Mom, you're 73, he said, stirring sugar into coffee I'd made with hands that still worked just fine. "We need to be realistic about your future." Realistic. As if love had an expiration date. As if sacrifice had a statute of limitations. I'd worked double shifts at the textile factory for 30 years after his father walked out. Came home with fabric burns on my arms and lint in my lungs, but I came home. I never missed a parent-teacher conference, never forgot a birthday, never let him see me cry when the bills piled higher than my hope. When he got accepted to law school, I took out a second mortgage on the house. When he graduated, I was so proud I nearly burst. When he married Christine and they needed a down payment for their first place, I emptied my savings account without hesitation. And now he was asking about my end-of-life wishes like I was already gone. The first red flag should have been Christine's sudden interest in my weekly routine. She'd never cared before whether I went to bingo on Thursdays or got my hair done on Saturdays, but suddenly she was full of questions, showing up with notebooks and that plastic smile she wore when she wanted something. "We just want to make sure you're safe, Mom Patterson," she'd say, making lists of my daily activities like she was documenting evidence. "You're getting older and we worry." Worry? Such a pretty word for such an ugly lie. The second red flag was Marcus's new fascination with my house. The 3-bedroom colonial I'd bought in 1987 when property values were low and dreams were high. He started pointing out every creaky floorboard, every crack in the paint, every sign that time had touched my home the same way it had touched me. "This place is getting to be too much for you," he'd say, running his finger along a windowsill and showing me the dust like it was evidence of my incompetence. The upkeep alone must be overwhelming. But I wasn't overwhelmed. I was managing just fine. Yes, I'd slipped in the shower once, and yes, I'd forgotten to pay the electric bill twice, but I was 73, not brain dead. I still drove to the grocery store, still tended my garden, still beat half the town at bridge every Wednesday night. I was living, not dying. That's when the accidents started happening. First it was my medication. I'd been taking the same heart pills for 5 years, same dose, same time every day. Suddenly I was mixing them up, taking the morning pills at night, the night pills in the morning. I'd find extra pills in the wrong bottles or empty bottles that should have been full. When I mentioned it to Marcus, he got that look, the one that said he was filing away information for later use. "Mom, this is exactly what we're worried about," he said, exchanging glances with Christine. "Medication errors can be deadly at your age." Then it was the stove. I'd been cooking for 50 years without burning down the house, but suddenly I was leaving burners on. Marcus would come over and dramatically sniff the air, claiming he smelled gas. He'd check the stove and shake his head like I'd narrowly avoided disaster. "What if you'd fallen asleep?" he'd ask. "What if there had been a fire?" The thing is, I never left burners on. I was obsessive about checking the stove, the same way I'd been obsessive about checking the locks when he was little and I was afraid someone might hurt him. But every time Marcus visited, there was evidence of my supposed negligence. A pot left out, a burner dial turned to the on position, the smell of gas lingering in the air. I started to doubt myself. That's the cruelest part of gaslighting. It makes you question your own sanity. I'd lie awake at night wondering if I really was losing my mind, if the child I'd raised to be honorable was actually trying to save me from myself. Then came the call that changed everything. "Mom, I need you to come to the lawyer's office with me today," Marcus said on a Tuesday morning in October. His voice was tight, professional. The voice he used with clients, not family. "There are some papers we need to go over. Estate planning stuff." I should have said no, should have asked more questions. Should have trusted the ice-cold feeling in my stomach that told me something was wrong. But he was my son, and despite everything, I still believed that meant something. The lawyer's office was downtown, in one of those glass buildings that make you feel small before you even walk inside. Marcus held my elbow as we crossed the parking lot, guiding me like I was an invalid instead of a woman who'd walked perfectly fine for 7 decades. "Just some routine paperwork," he said when I hesitated at the door. "Power of attorney stuff. You know, in case something happens." The lawyer was young, maybe 30, with manicured nails and a smile that never reached her eyes. She had a stack of papers already prepared, tabs marked with little yellow arrows showing me where to sign. "Mrs. Patterson," she said, her voice honey-sweet and sharp as a blade, "your son is being very responsible, planning ahead like this. These documents will make things so much easier if you ever become incapacitated." Incapacitated. Another clinical word for another personal violation. I started reading the first page, but Marcus put his hand over mine. "Mom, we don't need to go through every single line. It's all standard stuff. The lawyers explained everything to me already." Something in his voice made me pull my hand away and keep reading. Power of attorney. Medical decisions, financial decisions. The right to make choices about my living situation. "Marcus," I said slowly, "this gives you control over everything. My bank accounts, my house, my medical care. Only if something happens to you," he said quickly. "Only if you can't make decisions for yourself. It's just a precaution." But the papers said otherwise. The papers said he could invoke these powers if I was deemed unable to manage my affairs, and the definition of unable was so broad it could include anything from a simple mistake to a moment of confusion. I should have walked out, should have torn up those papers and demanded answers. Instead I signed them, because he was my son and I trusted him, and love makes you do stupid things even when you're smart enough to know better. 2 weeks later, I woke up in a place I'd never seen before. The ceiling was white acoustic tile with brown water stains that looked like ink blots. The walls were institutional beige, the kind of color that's supposed to be calming but just makes you feel like you're already dead. There was a hospital bed, a plastic chair and a window that looked out onto a parking lot where cars sat baking in the sun like abandoned dreams. I tried to sit up, but my head felt heavy, disconnected from my neck. My mouth tasted like cotton and chemicals. When I tried to call out, my voice came out as a croak. A woman in scrubs appeared at the door. She was middle-aged with kind eyes and the tired smile of someone who'd seen too much sadness. "Oh good, you're awake," she said, checking her watch. "I'm Janet, your nurse. How are you feeling, honey?" "Where am I?" I managed to ask. "You're at Sunset Manor. Your son brought you in yesterday. Said you'd had a fall and were confused about where you were." A fall. I tried to remember falling, but my memory was fuzzy, full of gaps like a puzzle with missing pieces. The last clear thing I remembered was making breakfast in my own kitchen, the morning sun streaming through my own windows. "I want to call my son," I said. Janet's smile faltered slightly. "Well, he's the one who brought you here. Said you'd been having some difficulties, memory problems, medication mix-ups. He thought it would be best if you had some professional supervision for a while." Professional supervision, like I was a criminal instead of a mother. "I want to go home," I said. "Let's just see how you feel in a day or two," Janet said, patting my arm with practiced compassion. Sometimes after a traumatic event, it takes time to get your bearings back. But I had my bearings. What I didn't have was my freedom. I spent the next 3 days trying to piece together how I'd ended up in this place. My memory came back in fragments. Marcus coming to check on me, finding me confused on the kitchen floor, the ambulance ride that felt more like a kidnapping, the hospital where doctors asked me questions I couldn't answer because my mind felt wrapped in fog. They drugged me. I realized it on the 4th day when the medication fog finally started to lift. The pills they were giving me supposedly to help with my anxiety and confusion were keeping me docile, compliant, easy to manage. When I refused to take them, Janet looked genuinely distressed. "Mrs. Patterson, your son specifically requested these medications. He said you'd been very agitated at home, paranoid even. These will help you feel better." Paranoid. The word hit me like a slap. I'd been right to be suspicious, right to doubt, right to feel like something was wrong. But now my own son was using my instincts against me, painting my awareness as mental illness. That's when I started planning. The first thing I did was befriend my roommate, Eleanor. She was 91 and sharper than most people half her age. Her family had put her in Sunset Manor after she'd broken her hip, and she'd been there 6 months waiting for a bed to open up at the assisted living facility she actually wanted. "They drug half the people in here to keep them quiet," she told me one night when the nurses thought we were asleep. "Especially the ones whose families want them to stay put. Makes everyone's life easier except the person taking the pills." Eleanor had been a legal secretary for 40 years. She knew about power of attorney, about elder abuse, about the tricks adult children use to separate their parents from their money and their rights. "Your son filed papers claiming you're incompetent," she said after I told her my story. "Probably has a doctor's signature saying you're not safe to live alone. That's how they do it. Make it look official, make it look like love instead of theft." "But I'm not incompetent," I said. "I know that, and you know that, but the system doesn't know that. Once you're in a place like this, it's hard to prove you don't belong here. The drugs make you confused. The confusion makes you look incompetent, and the incompetence justifies keeping you here. It's a perfect circle of legal abuse. That night I lay awake staring at those water-stained ceiling tiles and made a decision. If Marcus wanted to play games with papers and lawyers and drugs, I'd play games too. But I'd play to win. The first step was getting clean. I started hiding my pills instead of taking them, spitting them out when the nurses weren't looking, pretending to swallow while palming the medication. It took a week for my head to fully clear, but when it did, I felt like myself again for the first time since this nightmare started. The second step was gathering intelligence. I befriended other residents, learning their stories, understanding how the system worked. I talked to nurses during shift changes when they were tired and more likely to let information slip. I listened at doorways when families came to visit, hearing the conversations they thought no one else could hear. What I learned made my blood run cold. Marcus had been planning this for months. The medication mix-ups at home, he'd been switching my pills, creating evidence of my confusion. The gas smell in the kitchen, he'd been turning on the burners himself during his visits, then discovering them later. The fall that supposedly brought me here, there had been no fall. He'd drugged my morning coffee with sleeping pills, then called 911 claiming I was found unconscious and disoriented. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what he'd done to my house. Eleanor helped me make phone calls when the nurses weren't watching. First I called my bank. My accounts had been frozen for my protection, while I was receiving medical care. Marcus now had full control over my finances as my power of attorney. Then I called my neighbor Mrs. Chen, who'd lived next door to me for 15 years. "Oh honey," she said when she heard my voice. "I was wondering when you'd call. Marcus told everyone you'd had a stroke and had to go to a special facility, but something didn't seem right about it." "Mrs. Chen," I said, my heart hammering, "is my house still there?" There was a long pause. "Well yes, but, honey, there's a for sale sign in your yard, has been for 2 weeks now. Marcus said you'd decided to sell it to pay for your care." The phone nearly slipped from my shaking hands. He was selling my house. The house I'd bled for, sacrificed for, nearly lost twice trying to keep when money was tight. The house that held every memory of the life I'd built from nothing. "Has anyone been looking at it?" I asked. "Oh yes, lots of people. It's priced to sell fast. Marcus told the realtor you needed the money quickly for medical expenses." After I hung up I sat in the common room staring at a puzzle someone had abandoned half-finished. The pieces were scattered across the table, fragments of a picture that might have been beautiful if someone had cared enough to complete it. That's when Eleanor found me. "What did you find out?" she asked, settling into the chair beside me. I told her everything. About the house, the bank accounts, the months of calculated manipulation that had led me to this moment. Eleanor was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Do you want to fight this?" "I don't know how." "I do. I've been watching this happen to people for 6 months now. I know who to call, what papers to file, how to prove you're competent when everyone's invested in believing you're not." She leaned closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "But if we do this, we do it right. No half measures, no mercy, no second chances. Your son isn't just stealing your money, he's stealing your life. If we're going to stop him, we're going to destroy him." I looked at the abandoned puzzle, at the scattered pieces of someone else's incomplete picture, and made my choice. "Tell me what we need to do." The plan Lemon laid out was complex, requiring patience, precision and absolute secrecy. Step 1 was establishing my competency through independent medical evaluation. Step 2 was gathering evidence of Marcus's fraud. Step 3 was legal action to reclaim my rights and my property. But Step 4 was personal. Eleanor had connections from her decades in the legal field. Lawyers who specialized in elder abuse, private investigators who knew how to gather evidence, doctors who could perform cognitive assessments outside the system that had declared me incompetent. "The key," Eleanor explained, "is proving that your placement here was based on falsified information. If we can show that Marcus lied about your condition, forged medical records, or manipulated evidence, the whole house of cards comes down." It took 3 weeks to arrange everything. 3 weeks of pretending to be the confused, docile woman Marcus had created, while secretly meeting with lawyers during recreational outings, and undergoing cognitive tests that proved my mind was sharp as ever. The private investigator Eleanor recommended was a woman named Sarah Martinez, a former police detective who'd started her own agency after getting tired of cases that never got solved. She was in her 40s with steel gray hair and eyes that seemed to see through lies like they were made of glass. "I've seen this before," Sarah told me during our first meeting in a coffee shop downtown. Eleanor had arranged for me to have a day pass for family therapy that we were using to meet with my real family, the people who were helping me fight back. Adult children who get impatient waiting for their inheritance. They speed up the process by manufacturing a crisis. Sarah had already started investigating Marcus. What she'd found was damning. Your son has been living beyond his means for years, she said, spreading photos across the table between us. New car, expensive vacations, private school for his kids. His law practice is struggling. He's been borrowing against his house, maxing out credit cards. He needed money fast, and your house was the quickest solution. She showed me bank records obtained through legal channels, credit reports, emails between Marcus and his realtor discussing the urgent sale of my property. But here's the smoking gun, Sarah said, sliding another document across the table. This is a copy of the medical report he used to have you committed. The doctor who supposedly signed it, he doesn't exist. Marcus forged the entire thing. I stared at the fake medical report, at my son's lies printed in black and white, and felt something inside me harden into diamond-sharp resolve. What happens now? I asked. Now we end this, Sarah said, but I have to warn you, when we make our move there's no going back. Your son won't just lose the house. He'll lose his law license, probably face criminal charges for fraud and forgery. His life as he knows it will be over. I thought about the little boy I'd sung to sleep, the teenager I'd stayed up all night waiting for when he missed curfew, the young man I'd been so proud of when he passed the bar exam. Then I thought about the cold calculation in his eyes when he'd asked about my end-of-life wishes, the way he'd guided me into that lawyer's office like I was cattle heading to slaughter. He ended his own life when he decided to end mine, I said. The legal assault began on a Monday morning. Eleanor and I were officially discharged from Sunset Manor after independent medical evaluations confirmed we were both competent to make our own decisions. The facility, faced with potential liability for holding us against our will based on falsified documents, was eager to see us go. Sarah had arranged for us to stay in an extended stay hotel while the legal proceedings played out. It felt strange to be in the world again after weeks of institutional confinement, like stepping out of a cave into sunlight that was almost too bright to bear. But I didn't have time to adjust. We had work to do. The first lawsuit was against Marcus personally: fraud, elder abuse, forgery, and a dozen other charges that would strip him of everything he'd tried to steal from me. The second was against the realtor and the buyer of my house, nullifying the sale based on the fact that Marcus had no legal right to sell property he didn't own. The third was the nuclear option, a criminal complaint that would send Marcus to prison. I expected him to fight, expected him to hire lawyers to claim he'd been acting in my best interest, to paint himself as the concerned son and me as the vindictive mother. What I didn't expect was for him to crumble completely. The call came on a Thursday evening. I was in my hotel room, reviewing documents with Eleanor, when my phone rang. Marcus's name appeared on the screen and for a moment I hesitated. Then I answered. Mom? His voice was small, broken, the voice of a child caught in a lie so big he couldn't find his way out of it. Hello, Marcus. Mom, please, can we talk? Can we work this out? What's to work out? You put me in a nursing home so you could steal my house. You forged medical documents. You drugged me. You told everyone I was losing my mind while you were the one committing crimes. I was desperate, he said, and I could hear him crying. The practice is failing. The kids' school costs are enormous. Christine's been threatening to leave if we don't get our finances straight. I thought if I could just get enough money to get back on my feet. You thought you could bury me alive to save yourself. I never meant for it to go this far. I was going to get you out once the house sold, find you a nice apartment, make sure you were comfortable. I wasn't trying to hurt you, but he was lying, even to himself. The paperwork Sarah had uncovered told a different story, documents showing he'd been planning to keep me at Sunset Manor indefinitely, paying the monthly fees out of the proceeds from my house until the money ran out. Then what? A state facility, a pauper's grave. Marcus, I said, my voice steady as stone, you made your choice when you decided I was worth more dead than alive. Now you get to live with the consequences. Mom, please, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I'm sorry too, I said. I'm sorry I raised a son who could look at the woman who gave him everything and see nothing but dollar signs. I hung up before he could respond. The criminal trial made headlines in our small city. Local lawyer charged with elder abuse. Son accused of forging documents to steal mother's home. The case that has everyone talking. I sat in the courtroom every day, watching Marcus squirm under the weight of evidence that painted him as a calculating predator who'd targeted his own mother. His lawyer tried to portray him as a loving son who'd made poor decisions under financial pressure. But the forged medical documents, the manufactured evidence of my incompetence, the secret meetings with realtors, it all painted a picture of cold, calculated cruelty. Christine filed for divorce halfway through the trial. Their kids, my grandchildren, were pulled out of their private school when the family accounts were frozen pending the outcome of the case. Marcus's law practice collapsed as clients fled and partners distanced themselves from the scandal. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. Guilty on all counts, the judge sentenced Marcus to 3 years in prison and ordered him to pay full restitution for the money he'd stolen, plus damages for the emotional distress he'd caused. His law license was permanently revoked. But that wasn't enough, not for what he'd done to me. Not for the nights I'd lain awake in that beige room wondering if I'd ever see my own home again. Not for the way he'd made me doubt my own sanity, my own worth, my own right to exist on my own terms. I wanted him to understand what it felt like to lose everything, to be at the mercy of someone who was supposed to protect you. So I did something that surprised even Eleanor. I bought the house Marcus and Christine had lived in. The bank was eager to sell after the foreclosure. Marcus's legal troubles had made him unemployable, and Christine's teacher salary couldn't cover the mortgage on their oversized McMansion in the suburbs. They'd been evicted 2 weeks after the trial ended. I paid cash using money from the sale of investments Marcus never knew I had. Then I moved in right across the street from the apartment complex where Marcus was living with his kids on weekends when he wasn't in prison. The first time he saw me in what used to be his front yard, he stopped walking so suddenly that his youngest daughter bumped into him. "Daddy, what's wrong?" she asked. Marcus stared at me for a long moment, his face cycling through disbelief, rage and something that might have been fear. I was watering the roses I'd planted where Christine's prize-winning petunias used to grow, wearing the gardening gloves I'd bought with money from the sale of his dining room set. I waved. He grabbed his daughter's hand and hurried away. That became our routine. Every time Marcus came to pick up the kids, he'd see me, tending the garden that used to be his, sitting on the porch that used to be his, living the comfortable life he'd thought he could steal from me. I made friends with the neighbors, the same neighbors who'd watched his family get evicted, who'd whispered about the scandal, who now treated me like a local celebrity for fighting back and winning. I hosted book club meetings in the living room where Christine used to display photos of their perfect family. I threw birthday parties for Eleanor's great-grandchildren in the backyard where Marcus used to grill steaks he couldn't afford. But the cruelest touch was the garden. I planted it exactly where Marcus used to park his BMW, the one that got repossessed when his world fell apart. A memorial garden, I told the neighbors, for my old life, the one that died when I learned what my son really thought of me. The centerpiece was a stone bench with an engraving, in memory of trust betrayed but not forgotten. Marcus saw it every time he drove past, every time he came to get his kids, every time he remembered what he'd lost and who he'd lost it to. One evening about 6 months after I'd moved in, he knocked on my door. He was thinner than I remembered, wearing clothes that looked like they came from a discount store. Prison had changed him, aged him, stripped away the confidence that used to make him seem larger than life. "Can we talk?" he asked. I let him in more out of curiosity than kindness. He stood in the living room that used to be his, looking around at my furniture and his space, at the life I'd built in the ruins of his dreams. "Why?" he asked. "Why this house? Why here?" I sat down in my favorite chair, the recliner I'd bought with money from selling his golf clubs, and looked at him for a long moment. "Do you remember when you were 8 and you broke Mrs. Henderson's window with your baseball?" I asked. He looked confused. "What does that have to do with anything? You came home crying, terrified that you were going to be in trouble. And I told you that when you make a mistake, the only way to fix it is to face the consequences and make it right. Remember?" He nodded slowly. "You broke more than a window, Marcus. You broke trust. You broke love. You broke the sacred bond between a mother and child. And this," I gestured around the room, "this is me making it right. By destroying my life. Your life was already destroyed. You destroyed it the moment you decided I was disposable. I'm just making sure you remember that choice every single day." He was quiet for a long time. Then he asked, "Will you ever forgive me?" I thought about forgiveness. About the sermons I'd heard growing up that said you had to forgive to find peace. But I'd found peace without forgiveness. I'd found peace in justice, in truth, in the simple act of refusing to disappear when someone wanted me gone. "Forgiveness isn't about what you deserve," I told him. "It's about what I need. And what I need is for you to understand that actions have consequences. That people aren't disposable. That love isn't something you can take for granted." "I understand now," he said. "Do you? Because understanding isn't the same as feeling. You understood that what you were doing was wrong when you were doing it. You had to forge documents, lie to doctors, drug your own mother. You knew it was wrong, but you did it anyway because you thought you wouldn't get caught." I stood up, walked to the window that looked out onto the street where his children played in the courtyard of their apartment complex. "Your children come to see me sometimes," I said. "Did you know that? They ring the doorbell and ask if I'm really their grandmother. They want to know why Daddy doesn't talk to me anymore, why we don't have family dinners, why everything changed." Marcus's face crumpled. "What do you tell them?" "I tell them the truth, that sometimes adults make choices that hurt the people they love. That actions have consequences. That love isn't about what you say, it's about what you do. They're innocent in all this. So was I." He left without another word. I watched him walk across the street to the apartment complex, His shoulders bent like he was carrying a weight that would never get lighter. That was 3 years ago. Marcus finished his prison sentence and moved to another state, taking his children with him. I heard through the grapevine that he works construction now, that he's remarried, that he's trying to rebuild his life somewhere nobody knows his story. I still live in his old house. I've made it mine now, repainted the walls, replaced the floors, filled it with furniture that reflects my taste instead of his. The memorial garden has grown wild and beautiful, attracting butterflies and hummingbirds that make the space feel alive in a way it never did when it was just a driveway. Eleanor passed away last winter, peacefully in her sleep at the assisted living facility she'd finally gotten into. She left me her recipe box and a note that said, "For the woman who taught me that it's never too late to fight back." I keep busy. I volunteer at the senior center, helping other elderly people navigate legal issues and family conflicts. I've become something of a local expert on elder abuse, speaking at conferences and training sessions about the warning signs and legal remedies. But mostly I just live. I live freely, fully on my own terms. I make my own decisions about what to eat, when to sleep, how to spend my money, where to go. I take trips when I want to, buy things I don't need, stay up too late reading books that make me think. I live the life Marcus tried to steal from me, and every day I wake up in my own bed in my own house making my own choices is a victory. Sometimes people ask me if I regret what I did to Marcus, if I think my revenge went too far, if I feel guilty about destroying his life. I tell them what I told the judge at his sentencing hearing. I didn't destroy his life. I revealed it. The destruction was already there, hidden behind the facade of a dutiful son. I just made it visible, because that's the thing about betrayal, it doesn't create monsters, it reveals them. Marcus was always capable of what he did to me, the financial pressure, the desperation, the opportunity. They didn't make him into someone who could drug his mother and forge documents and lie to doctors. They just gave him permission to become who he really was, and who he really was, it turned out, was someone who saw his mother as an obstacle to be removed rather than a person to be cherished. That's not something you forgive, that's something you remember. I'm 81 now, still living independently, still making my own choices. My health is good, my mind is sharp, and my life is full of people who value me for who I am rather than what I'm worth. Marcus sends cards sometimes, Christmas, birthdays, Mother's Day, generic cards with generic messages signed, "Love, Marcus," in handwriting, that looks like he's trying not to think too hard about what the words mean. I don't respond. What would I say? That I'm glad he's alive, that I hope he's learned something, that I wish things had been different. All of those things are true, but they're not the whole truth. The whole truth is that I sleep well at night, knowing that somewhere out there Marcus wakes up every morning and remembers what he lost. He remembers the mother who loved him unconditionally, until he gave her a reason not to. He remembers the trust he shattered, the relationship he destroyed, the future he threw away for money that was never really his to begin with. And maybe if I'm lucky, he remembers that his mother was stronger than he thought. That the woman he tried to erase refused to disappear. That love once withdrawn doesn't come back just because you're sorry. That's the burden I gave him in return for the one he tried to give me. The burden of knowing that some things once broken can never be repaired. Some people call it revenge. I call it education. After all, I spent 73 years teaching him right from wrong. It was time for him to learn the lesson.